Welcome to Learning Photography with Duck. Here's your host, Duck.
Okay, I think I'm good to go. I'm a little nerve-wracked, as I mentioned earlier. I've been working with a new client, and they got some pretty intense stuff that I've been photographing with all kinds of reflective surfaces. Editing isn't easy, but part of the job. Anyway, as always, I am your host, Duck. Welcome once again to another edition of Learn Photography with Duck. And today we have Q&A. So hopefully you guys have questions for me. But before we get to your questions, there's a couple of things that I want to put out. Of course, coming up this Friday, or this weekend, I should say, is the Connecticut PPA annual convention. If you're interested in checking out PPA, this might be a good opportunity. It's also a great learning experience. There's all kinds of workshops. So if you're interested, go to the ctppa.com website and you can register there. A while back, I did a poll about if anybody was interested in doing kind of like a long form flash photography workshop. The response I got was pretty good. There's a lot of interest in long form workshops rather than short form being, an hour, 2 hour long. But most people said, well, let's not make it all day. All right, that's a little too long. So we settled on doing a 4-hour workshop. It's going to be in conjunction with Milford Photo. I did not update the date on there. I should have done that. We have settled on a date. It's going to be next month. Let me just double check. On the 22nd. So July 22nd. And I believe we settled from 1. Yeah, from 1. Yeah, I think from 1 o'clock to 5. All right. So that hasn't been published yet by Milford Photo. They're going to kind of go over the final details. It's going to be $40. And it's going to be held at the, there's a building right next to Milford Photo. It used to be the old Milford Library before they moved. That building is vacant and he has use of that building. So we'll be holding it in there. Hopefully we'll get some pretty cool stuff. But this is going to be a fundamentals workshop, where if you're not sure how flash photography works, and it doesn't matter if you're looking at studio lighting or if you're looking at, on-camera flash lighting or whatever it is, we're covering the fundamentals. It's going to apply across the board to any intermittent lighting setup that you may use. So once you get the fundamentals, of course, you can take that information and build upon it. But hopefully by the end of the workshop, you'll be able to comfortably use at least a single strobe and have an understanding about how adding multiple strobes to your setup will play into the equation. So if you are interested in learning anything about strobe lighting, this is going to be the workshop for you guys. So once Jesse makes it live on Meetup, I'll post it on Facebook with a link to the Meetup page where you can register for the class there. Okay. Also coming up, and I think it was the weekend before. What did I do? Yeah, July 15th, which is the Saturday before the Flash workshop. I'll be doing the multiplicity photo shoot. That's going to be at Hubbard Park in Meriden. Great location. I scouted it out a couple weeks ago with my buddy Greg, and we found this great location. It's got a little gazebo, it's got a little waterfall, it's got a pond, it's got, you know, all kinds of scenic stuff to use as your backdrop. And the way it works is you're going to be creating a little scene where you populate the scene with different versions of yourself. So here's a great idea for you to experiment with, you know, creating a theme, selecting props that you can use for your theme. And of course, you're going to be modeling yourself within the scene. So you get to experience what it's like to be on the front end of the camera rather than behind the camera, which is a great experience because once you've experienced being in front of the camera, you have a little bit more sympathy for what it entails, you know, with working with a model when you get to walk in their shoes. You also get to develop a little bit of a vocabulary so that it kind of takes the ambiguity out of working with a model. You'll be working with another photographer, you'll switch places, you'll be using your own camera, and in the end, you'll walk away with a series of images that we'll be putting together in Photoshop, and we'll have the Monday following the Multiplicity workshop. We're going to dedicate that episode of Learn Photography with Duck on how to use Photoshop to assemble them into a single image. So hopefully you'll join us for that. In other news that's not listed here, some of you know that I have been developing a little game called, it's a photo hunt game. After talking with some more knowledgeable people about copyrights and trademarks and things like that, it was suggested that I change the name to something a little bit more original and unique. So I've been working on reconfiguring the entire deck. It's actually 2 decks of 52 cards, reconfiguring the whole deck with the new name. I've updated some of the descriptions because they were a little bit ambiguous. But the way the game works is it's a series of cards, size of playing cards. They kind of look like, you know, the typical game cards that you'll find, you know, like the Pokemon or Magic the Gathering and all these other, you know, game cards. They look just like that. But these are meant to be prompts for photographers to challenge them in completing some kind of a task. And I've done it in the past. I have a deck, a sample deck that I had printed up that I've used to test it out, and it's always been a big hit. So I'm looking to put that onto the books as well. I just have to find a location. I'm thinking of going back to downtown Waterbury on the Green. It's a great little place. I loved it there, but I'm open to suggestions if anybody's got any suggestions. All right, so look for that coming up in the future. Okay, so that's it for coming up stuff. Like I said, today's Q&A, but before we get into the questions, I just want to touch on something that I tossed out to you guys a while back, and that is the idea of working on a photo book using using Adobe Lightroom in order to put your book together. Lightroom has the book publishing module that allows you to custom create pages. What I didn't talk about is any of the design aspects of putting your book together. And if you're not a designer, this may seem like a daunting task. You can say, well, I got, you know, a bunch of photos that, you know, I'd like to put together into a book. The idea sounds great, but I really don't know how to go about putting a book together. All right. So what I suggest you do is don't reinvent the wheel, meaning you don't have to build from scratch. there are plenty of resources out on the internet that you can look up. And what I did is I just typed the prompt basic photo book layouts in the image in Google Images, and it gives you a bunch of suggestions based on articles that it finds throughout the internet. And the nice thing is you can look through these and say, ooh, I like the way they did that. I like the way they did that. All right. Rip it off. If you like it, take it, use it as inspiration for your own book. Okay. Look at how they leave, plenty, like, for example, let me see if I can pull this one up here. Where was it? Yeah, of course. Opens up the page and it's lost. All right, so like, for example, oops. Okay. If we look at this, you can see how there's plenty of, let me zoom in. Oops. Yeah, that's not working properly. Okay. Oh, desktop. Zoom in. Okay. See how there's plenty of white space around here? It's not really crowding it. All right. It makes the that little bit of information really stand forward. You say, oh, I kind of like the way that is presented. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. All you got to do is take that aspect of it and include it in your own book. Okay. If you like a certain, like, for example, this one has a, using a color palette of peach. You can use it as inspiration for your own book. It says, oh, I kind of like that peach and white combination. All right. And you can see here that they're also using a, middle gray as kind of the mid-tone between the two. So, don't be afraid to borrow. All right. It's not stealing. All right. Stealing is if you take everything that you see here, plaster your name on it and say, hey, this is what I did. You're not stealing, you're borrowing, you're taking inspiration from it, because in the end, the book that you put together is not going to look like this. It's going to be your own thing. But instead of racking your brain on how to put it together, you're borrowing those ideas from here. All right. Design ideas, they're not, unique to a specific designer or anything. Okay. If you look at some of these, you'll see there's a lot of similarities. So anyway, that's what I suggest you do. Do a little research, find something that kind of works for you and incorporate it into your own book. All right. I've been a little remiss in mine. I haven't been working on mine as I should, but in fairness, I've been kind of busy. So hopefully you guys haven't lost sight of that little goal for yourself. All right. So anyway, that's my little soapbox for today. I just wanted to get that out. So let's open it up for questions. If anybody has any. Oh, actually, yeah, Carol had a question. She sent me a message via Facebook. So since you're here, Carol, I will go ahead and let you ask the question.
Yeah, with 4th of July coming up and all the fireworks and everything, July 8th, I'm going to go to the Thames River. But anyway, I wanted a refresher on how to take firework photos, because I noticed let's put a cardboard in front of it. I haven't done it in a while. I wanted, take good fireworks.
Okay. Did I hear you say something about putting cardboard?
Yeah, like, when the fireworks are going off, you have it on the tripod and you have it on shutter release. And then, you put a cardboard in front of it for a little bit and then remove it and then.
I see what you mean. Yeah, I know what you're talking about now. Okay.
So
All
I
right.
did that and I took really great fireworks pictures, but that was a long time ago. But I'm going this year, to take pictures.
Okay. All right. So you want a refresher on how to take firework photos. Okay. The first suggestion I would make is, all right, there's one particular show that you're definitely going to. It's going to be big. There's going to be lots of fireworks. Okay. If you get a chance, find a different show, one that falls maybe a day or two before the one you're going to. It doesn't have to be big. It could be just something that, maybe a local neighborhood is doing. All right. That way it'll allow you to kind of like test your setup before you actually go. Okay. If at worst, all right, don't panic. If you don't get a chance to test ahead of time, usually most shows last a really long time. And there's a build up. They start off with one or two little, teasers. Okay. And then of course it culminates in a big, everything, all out show. So you're going to have plenty of time to test your settings. All right. The thing to understand when photographing fireworks is even though it is at night, okay, you're going to be photographing something that is very, very bright. Okay, so let's take a step back and into the fundamentals. All right, those of you who have heard me teach, I teach the where you want to set your ISO to the lighting environment. And I usually tell people that if it's bright during the day, you're going to be at ISO 100. As soon as you step inside, it goes to 400. And when the light starts going down, you're going to start upping the ISO. Okay. Well, in this situation, even though you're going to be outdoors in the dark, we're not going to be upping the ISO too much. Okay, because one, we don't want to introduce a lot of noise into something that's already going to have, in a way, noise because of all the small points of light and texture. Okay, so we have to balance that. What we do have to consider is that balance between speed, all right, our shutter speed, and the speed of the action going on in the sky. All right, so let's take a sidestep and think about how we photograph waterfalls. One of the things about waterfalls is if you want that nice, smooth, kind of like silky water look, you need to open your shutter a little bit longer in order to allow that water to flow through the scene. Okay, and I normally tell people for a waterfall, you want to count how long it takes for something, a theoretical something, to travel from the top of the waterfall to the bottom of the waterfall. All right, and then add a little bit to that. So if it takes 1 second if you were to throw a beach ball up at the top and you were to follow that down, if it takes 1 second, you would do like maybe a second, second and a half, or even 2 seconds. Okay, and what that's going to do is it's going to blur the action. The same thing is going to happen with the fireworks. All right, when the firework explodes, it's going to send out sparks, and the sparks are going to be going out, cascading out, and flowing down, very similar to a waterfall. And what makes the fireworks impressive is when you can see that light trail rather than just kind of like freezing the individual little sparks. Okay, so having that light trail kind of really adds to the majesty of fireworks. All right. So we have to take into consideration that we want the shutter open pretty much for everything that you want to capture. Now, what you want to capture is going to be dependent on you. Do you want to capture the trail of the rocket going up as well as the explosion? Or do you want to capture just the explosion as it happens? Okay, so that's entirely up to you. So the first thing you want to do is you want to put your camera on bulb mode. All right, that way you can leave your shutter open for as long as you want, and it'll stay open until you release the shutter. Okay, now because we are using bulb mode, that's going to dictate a couple of things right off the bat. You're going to need to be on a tripod. All right, and because you're going to be holding the shutter open, I suggest getting a shutter release. All right, and my pet peeve is, all right, get a corded shutter release. Don't use your app. Don't use, you know, the infrared ones. Get a corded one, because that's going to give you the most amount of control. Okay. So you're going to have to test it a couple of times to get the timing right, but you're going to watch as the rocket goes up. If you want to capture the rocket, as the rocket enters your frame, you're going to trip the shutter, and you're going to keep the shutter open until everything kind of cascades out into a nice, you know, what they call the flower, and then you shut the shutter. Okay, and then you'll have yourself a nice display of fireworks. Okay, which now leads us to the question, well, all right, I understand that part, but what is the exposure? Okay, so the exposure is the exposure has a certain leeway. Okay, you have to understand that these fireworks are very, very bright, especially when they go off really, really large. I mean, some of these fireworks are so bright that it will light the ground and everything around you as if it was daytime. All right, so that should tell you something. All right, but another analogy, let's take a little sidestep. Photographing the moon. Okay, if you've ever photographed the moon, you understand that you don't need to have a 3-second exposure for the moon, because the moon is very, very bright. The moon is nothing more than a reflector that is reflecting the sun. So it's going to have not quite the intensity of the sun, but it's going to be very bright because it is reflecting the sun. So we don't need a shutter speed in the 2 or 3 seconds because it's nighttime. We need a shutter speed that correlates to something being as bright as a sun, or being as bright as a bright bulb. All right, that's the same thing with fireworks. Fireworks are very, very bright, so we're going to need to have a shutter speed. Well, no, yeah, I'm sorry. We're going to need an exposure that is related to the amount of light. Okay, so now we discussed that we need to keep our shutter open for a certain amount of time in order to capture the display. So that's going to give us one part of our triangle. All right. The other part of the triangle is kind of set by our ISO. And then the third part of the triangle, of course, is the your aperture. Okay. So now, as we are timing it, you say, okay, it takes half a second, or it takes 1 second to capture that starburst. All right. Whatever it is. All right. At first, make it arbitrary. Set it at a second, see what it captures. If you need to go beyond that, you can always go beyond that. All right. You adjust. Okay. So now you've locked in your shutter speed. You got it to 1 second. Now we need to balance the other two. All right. I would suggest starting off with the ISO at 200 and adjusting from there. Okay. So now we have our shutter speed set to 1 second. We have our ISO set to 200. All we have to do now is set our aperture. All right. And our aperture is going to be modified until you get something that looks properly exposed. All right. But we need a starting point. What is the halfway point of your lens? As far as opening, from the biggest opening to the smallest opening. All right. Typically, across the board, no matter what camera lens you have, what manufacturer, whether it's a prime lens or whether it's a zoom lens, it's going to be one of two numbers, or around one of two numbers. It's either going to be f8 or it's going to be f11. Those two numbers tend to be the center. F8 is typical for prime lenses. F11 is typical for zoom lenses. All right. So that will be your starting point. All right. So if you have a zoom lens, possibly go to F11. If you're shooting with a prime, go ahead and start it off at F8. All right. And when the first firework goes off, go ahead and take a shot. All right. Once the shot's over, take a look at it and the screen. And for this, what I would suggest is don't rely too much on the screen. Rely on the histogram, all right? Because the majority of the screen is going to be dark, all right? And you're going to be in a darkened environment. All right. And the gamma on your display, meaning the brightness of your display, may be either brighter or darker than normal. So that's going to affect how you look at it in camera, which may not necessarily reflect what you're actually getting. All right. So take a look at it and also compare it to your histogram. Okay. Everything's going to be pretty much flat all the way from the left-hand side across, and then you'll see the spike over on the right-hand side. And it's going to be hopefully somewhere before it bumps all the way to the right-hand side. Okay? All right. So that's your fundamentals. All right. Shutter, I would start at 1 second. ISO, start at 200. Your aperture will be the middle of your lens, whether it's f8 or f11. All right. And adjust from there. All right. And what you will be adjusting is your shutter speed will adjust for how much of the firework you're capturing. Okay. How much of that flower, of that blooming, do you want to capture? Right. Of course, the longer you capture, the more of that cascade that you capture. Okay. And of course, keep in mind, do you want the trail of the rocket going up as well? If that's the case, then, you're going to be like 2 seconds, because you're going to have part of it going up, the explosion, and then the other part as it comes down. Make sense? Okay. Now,
Doug, I have a question.
sure.
What do you mean by middle of the lens, and how is f8 the middle of a lens on a prime and f11 the middle on a zoom.
Okay. Let me see if I can illustrate that. Where is my charts? Do I have a chart for? Ooh, I don't. Do I? Hold on, give me 1 second. I'm just gonna see if I have. Let's see. I think this one. Okay. Yeah, this one should work. All right. All right, we have a lens, all right, and we have our wide open, okay, which typically it's the smallest number, all right. So like for example, in this case, it's 2.8, okay, and then all the way on the far end, you have an aperture that is the smallest, that lets the least amount of light. Okay, and let's say for this example, it's that f32. Okay, so we have full stops between 2.8 and f32, correct? All right, so if we start counting in from the two ends, 1 stop, 2 stops, 3 stops, it's going to land in the center. All right, and if you notice, typically, no matter where you are, it's going to be somewhere around f8 or f11. All right. So, for example,
My lens opens up only to 3.5.
okay, no, that's fine. So if you're here and you're here, all right, this is your center, all right, you may be at f9 for the middle. All right.
Okay.
So you're still going to be in that middle between f8 and f11. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say your lens is a 1.4 to 32. All right. You have a really expensive, super fast lens. All right. Your middle is going to be f8. Gotcha. Got it?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's just the way it works out mathematically with the way lenses are made. Typically, f8, f11 is the middle, and it's going to give you that starting point. Okay.
Is that also what's the phrase I've heard? Sweet spot.
Yes, that is the sweet spot for zoom lenses. All right, for zoom lenses. Zoom lenses, they tend to be built from that sweet spot outward. All right. Okay, so now that you understand the camera settings, let's talk a little bit about the field work. Okay. If you got your camera on a tripod and you're, focusing your camera up into the sky, there typically nothing there for you to focus on, correct? It's not like you could put it on autofocus and, shoot it up to a black sky and press the shutter halfway and wait for that little indicator signal, beep, 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 saying that it locked focus. It's never going to happen, okay? Because there's nothing there to focus. So what can you do? Well, you can wait for one of the explosions and hope that the camera finds focus on, what's coming down, but that probably never going to work right. All right. But if we understand a little bit about how lenses work and how depth of field works and all that good stuff, all right, we can take advantage of that. All right. Now, the reason we're shooting at f8 or f11 is not so much that we want to, control our light bloom too much. That is one aspect of it. The other one is that we want to take advantage of the increased depth of focus, right? So what we want to do is once we get our camera up to the sky and kind of like the general vicinity of where we think the fireworks are going to go, and of course you'll change it as the event happens. All right, you're going to set your focus to infinity. All right, focus to infinity, and then back it up just a hair sliver. All right, so you're going to go and, in this case, take it off autofocus, right? Typically on the side of a lens. Let me see, do I have a lens? Yeah, I do. All right. Typically on the side of a lens, you'll have the autofocus AF, MF, right? You'll want to put it to manual focus. Okay, you don't need that autofocus kicking in as you're trying to take pictures. Right, so what you're going to do is you're going to put it to infinity. All right, and I don't know, this is probably not going to pick it up. Maybe if we could get the right. See, if I turn it all the way to infinity, that's a little sideways figure 8 symbol. There we go. All right, and then just kick it back just a little bit. All right, what that does is it puts the field of focus out into the sky. All right, and that will get you your start. All right, so the other thing I would suggest, if you're using a camera with a mirror, go into the menu settings and disable the mirror lockup. From experience, I find this really doesn't save you that much. All right, considering that the fireworks are already, there's a lot of movement going on out there. That little bit of camera movement that may be caused by the mirror slapping up is relatively insignificant. I've never looked at one of my pictures from a firework and said, "Oh, this is where that the mirror jiggled the camera." You'll never see it. Okay, but some people, they prefer that little extra caution. So if you want to lock your mirror up, that will create an extra step in your shutter release. All right, so you have to press it once to bring the mirror up, and then you press it again to trip the shutter. Okay, if you are in bulb mode, all right, meaning that the shutter is open, as long as you have that button pressed down, as soon as you let go of the button, that shutter will close up again. Okay, now Carol mentioned the piece of cardboard trick. All right, the way that works, let's see, do I have a piece of cardboard? The way it works, all right, is if you do not have, wait, no, actually, yeah, I guess if you do not have a shutter release, or even if you have a shutter release, yeah, although I don't understand why.
I've used for fireworks. I've used bulb mode with shutter release, and what I have done is I start when the firework is starting, and then when I'm happy with how it has trailed, then I've turned it off. I've had it up as much as 8 seconds.
Yeah. It also depends on how far away you are from the fireworks too. I find that
the cardboard could be used for multiple exposures on one file, right?
Yes, you can. All right. I was trying to think, why would somebody teach the cardboard trick? Because the cardboard,
That's an old film trick.
it is. You're absolutely right. And thank you, because I didn't consider the multiple exposures. All right, because in effect, this when your camera is in bulb mode, this is your shutter. All right, this is your shutter closed. This is your shutter open, and then that's it closed again. All right. But yeah, you're absolutely right. If you want to capture multiple exposures, I mentioned when we first started talking about this, how most fireworks shows start off relatively slow. They'll send up 1 or 2 rockets, and then there'll be a lull, and then a couple more, and then a lull. So if you want to shorten the space between those lulls, all right, and you want to photograph instead of individual rockets, so they send one up, it goes to the left, they send one up, it goes to the right. If you want both of those in the same frame, but you don't want to keep your shutter open the entire time, because what's going to happen is you're going to notice that the sky is no longer going to be black, it's going to start turning blue. All right, because in actuality, even though we don't see it, there is a lot of light up there, especially when the sun first sets. Like Alan said, you'll just point it up, you'll capture that first starburst, and then you'll put this over it, and you'll wait for the second starburst, capture the second starburst, and at that point you can release your bulb. Now, where's my shutter release? Most shutter releases, you can see this one here, all right? There's a little button, all right? If I press that, okay, it's a instant shutter release. It's like clicking the shutter on your camera. But if I press and hold and then slide up, it's going to lock it in the open position. So the shutter's going to stay open, all right, with the shutter release in this position until I bring it back down. Okay, so in effect, you can go ahead and click open your shutter, put that down, all right, do this. Oh, here's the second one, do this. Oh, here's the third one, do this. All right, here's a fourth one, and then, oops, dropping stuff. And then at that point, you go click, and you got multiple exposures captured on one frame. So that's the cardboard trick. Okay.
You were, with the cardboard, you were touching the lens. You don't want to touch the lens. Actually.
Well, yeah, you don't want.
You pretty much do, because you don't want extraneous light coming in from the side.
Okay. Yeah. To be honest, all right, this, with the camera and the lens situated on a tripod very, very heavily, this is very, very thin cardboard. Okay. You don't need, I would need to apply a lot of pressure to move that camera. All right. So I can literally put this up against my lens and it's not going to affect it. If I hit it this way, yes. All right. But just putting it on here, it's not going to do anything. If you notice, I'm not touching it with my fingers. Oh, my background's going crazy. All right. I'm just very lightly just covering the lens. Okay. Chipboard. That's this kind of cardboard is called chipboard. All right, you can see how thin. It's from the back of a notepad. That's all you need. Nothing fancy. All right. I've done it with my hat. Well, you guys know I wear my cowboy hat. Where's my hat? Hold on. Let me get my hat. This works even better. Because at this point, with my hat, I don't need to touch the lens, okay? All I got to do is go like this, and it's pretty much in darkness. All right, my hat just kind of covers everything, and I'm not touching that lens. So basically what you're doing is you're just stopping additional light going into the lens, and you're waiting for that opportune time for that display. All right, or as Henry Cartier-Bresson would say, the mental block, the decisive moment. You want to capture that decisive moment for the firework.
I'm
Okay.
gonna get technical on you, Doc.
Yeah.
Now, okay, fine. Okay, fine. So you put a piece of cardboard or your hat, whichever. Now you're introducing noise, right? Because the sensors themselves
Okay.
are going to continue to.
Ye-
Sorry, but that's.
Yes. Yes. In effect, yes. Okay. But if it's totally dark, there's no photon activity to bump the signal. All right. So there's kind of like an artificial inflation going on. All right, where the sensor's trying to figure out, okay.
It's trying to find.
Right, right, right. Okay.
There might
So
not be any, but it's trying to find it.
correct. All right. So here we get into the area of what's called reciprocity. All right. And it can get a little bit convoluted, but you want to actually pay attention to the downtimes so that you don't cross that threshold where you're artificially introducing noise into your scene by, holding the frame between multiple exposures. But you're absolutely right.
So that works best when the fireworks are going. There's no lag time really between the fireworks. They go bam, 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 bam. When the rockets are going up.
Well, all right. So
you're cutting that short.
yeah. So when, like I said at the beginning of the show, when they're sending up rockets, sporadically, all right. Now, when we're just watching it, we're not really counting the seconds or the milliseconds between one explosion going off and the other explosion going off. However, when it comes to the sensitivity of the shutter speed, fractions of a second matter. They play an important part. Okay. So with the lens open to the sky, okay, even though the sky is black, right, typically fireworks happen early in the evening as the sun has set. There's still a lot of light pollution up in the sky. And if you were to hold your shutter open, you can actually light that black sky. All right. If you ever seen night shots with this vibrant blue sky, all right, out in the field, you're not seeing that blue sky. What you're seeing is a black sky. The camera is capturing a blue sky because it's capturing that buildup of light energy over a very long period of time. All right. And it's typically a long period of time. All right. Usually 30 seconds, 40 seconds. Okay. In the case with the fireworks, we're not having a long length of time in between one explosion and the next. Okay. But there's enough of a lag that we don't want that background starting to turn blue on us. So what we want to do is we want to prevent the sensor from gaining more light, ambient light, not light from the fireworks, ambient light, which will now influence our background. So if we can minimize that by covering the lens, it's to our benefit. But overall, when we time it from when we, take that first frame or did that first firework to, the second or third firework, it's not really a long time. It's not like we're waiting, a minute for these fireworks to go off. All right. So that buildup of ambient light isn't going to be all that noticeable. Okay. If you find that there is a lag between fireworks, and yes, then it's where you're going to start seeing that buildup of ambient light. All right. But basically what we want to do is we want to do in-field editing and removing that lag time between shots, between, firework shots. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, artificial inflation of the sensor is a thing. And it's something to watch out for. But for fireworks, I don't think it's going to be that big of an influence. So cool. But it's good to know you understand that. I'm glad you do.
I have an add-on question.
Yeah.
I never heard of that technique you just described. So, can you hear me?
Yeah. The
I never
technique
heard
of
of
what? Of covering the lens?
Yeah, I never
Oh.
heard of that. I've just taken a picture of a firework. So, if you wanted to, another way to simulate that, could you, since your camera's on a tripod, could you just suck in all your pictures as layers and figure which ones you want to go together?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. In that case, yeah, you have a little bit more control because you can be selective as to which firework you want to use. All right. Doing the multiple exposure, it leaves itself to a lot of chance. Okay,
It
because
used to work well in film.
what's that?
It used to work well with film.
Oh, and you know what? It works really, really well with digital too. As a matter of fact, so well that the new the Olympus cameras now allows you to in camera. They have a term for it. I'm not an Olympus user, but they have a term for it where
Photo stacking.
what is it?
Photo stacking.
No. It's not photo stacking. It's where you put it into a mode that recognizes that it's only going to record new light coming onto the sensor. What's the term? I don't know. Olympus cameras do it very, very well. And it kind of alleviates that reciprocity issue. I don't know the term that they use, but basically, they're taking advantage of the sensor because it's got the global shutter, rather than relying on a mechanical shutter. It's got the electronic shutter. So the electronic can turn on and turn off the individual sensor cells. So what it does is says, okay, we're gonna expose, and every time we see new light, we're going to expose for that light. If not, we're going to shut off that cell, and it basically records just the light. Yeah.
I think I found it on the internet. It's a live composite.
Live composite. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
All I did was type Olympus camera takes in only new light because you said that.
Yep.
They came up with live composite.
Yeah, live composite, which is it's not a true like double exposure, all right, because it's literally recording the light trail. That's exactly what it's doing,
Is that does that come in handy for what do people do for shooting for photographing moving stars? And I don't,
Oh yeah, that's something totally different.
somebody keeps the camera shutter open for like maybe 20 seconds, and you have
Yeah, if you want to capture star trails, yeah.
Star trails, yeah.
Yeah. And that's where you get, the star pattern. It looks, very circular.
Yes.
Okay. But even those you can only keep your shutter open so long before you start blowing everything out, because it's actually taking in too much light. All right. Again, there's that reciprocity factor. All right. where you cross the threshold from capturing enough light within where the light sensor is being actuated to gathering too much light in the areas that shouldn't be registering light, okay, because of the ambience of light. And there's other factors to it. I'm not really explaining it the correct way, but that's kind of what you need to look out for. So you can go too far, hold it open too long, where now the light is starting to look like garbage. You want, nice crisp trails, all right? So most of those very sweeping light trail photos, it's usually a composite of 3, 4, 5 images, where it records that star going into the complete arc. Yeah, so that's just literally keeping your shutter open. With the live composite, that's a little bit different, because what it does is it registers any new light coming in, all right? And if that light is moving, it's only going to register the movement. It's not going to register anything else. Where it starts failing is if, like, for example, you have something static that is generating a lot of light, and that's just going to keep building up and building up and building up into the point where that becomes overexposed and you lose detail there. So you still have to watch your shutter speed, all right? But live composite is awesome for a lot of things.
Would light composite work for trails of car lights?
To an extent. Again, you have to be careful. You have to balance not only the moving lights that are going through the scene, but any static light and any ambient light. So if you have a cityscape, okay, you have to expose for that cityscape. All right. And then the live composite will, composite everything else. All right. I don't know exactly what the parameters are. Because I'm not, I don't use that system, and I've never shot with live composite, but from what I've seen, it facilitates a lot of that type of photography.
Rick Saver taught that in beginner's class that I took many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Light trail. I went out with a tripod in front of my place. I was living on a main drag, and I shot. But we had that as an assignment for North Haven Camera Club one time. So I shot in front of Town Hall, and I had the lights. And not only did I enter that in competition, but I put that on the Cheshire Facebook page. Hey, look at this, these trail lights past Town Hall. And people started with their comments complaining about how fast traffic is on Route 10. So I got rid of it altogether. That was not my intent for my photo.
Can't listen to the haters. Can't listen to the haters, So, yes, Carol.
Is there a maximum amount of time that you could leave the shutter open?
There is. And it's not like I can give you a number, because that is going to change according to the time of night. So when the fireworks first start, it's like I said, it's normally just after sunset. So the sky is dark, but there's still maybe, in the far horizon, you'll see that little bit of afterglow. All right. But the sky is relatively dark. All right. But if we were to hold the shutter open for like 3 seconds, we're going to notice that sky is no longer black on our sensor. It's starting to turn blue. Okay. So that 3 seconds is going to be your time limit. Okay. For right after sunset. As the sun goes over and we start getting into that nautical twilight and actual nighttime, all right, it requires a much longer shutter time in order to light that sky up the same way. So, you know, maybe an hour later, instead of 3 seconds, it's going to be a minute and a half. And then an hour later, it may be 10 minutes. All right. So you have to weigh it according to how soon after the sun has set you're actually capturing the image. And it's easy because, you know, as soon as the shot's over, it's going to display on your display, and you just look at it and it says, okay, the sky's still black. It hasn't turned blue.
Can I share my screen?
Sure, absolutely.
I just want to show you what I did. This may answer Carol's question. And again, I fooled around with this 2 years in a row. Hold on a second. Let's do this. And let's share. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, this is, luckily with the file name, I put a file name, how many seconds I took this with. This one I took, and it looks like a V. This was at 1 second.
Correct.
This one was at 8 seconds. I used bulb mode, and I looked at it. It's like, okay, this is what I like. This, okay, I don't like this anymore. I'll take my finger off of the button.
Yeah, and it's more of a feel than anything else.
Now these two were fairly close.
Yep.
These two were fairly close.
Yep.
This one was at a distance. This was, you know, when Sue ran, what was that group? Shutterbuds.
Shutterbuds, okay.
She had
Yeah.
8 years ago, fireworks. Carol, I don't know if you were there. Ellen, I don't think you were in the group then. But we met on the grounds of the Connecticut Hospital in Middletown. And we were quite a distance away shooting. This was over the Connecticut River. And this was at 2 seconds.
Yeah. And if you had shot that one at like 5 seconds, you'd probably see more of that the buildings and the ground plane probably would have come out a little bit brighter. So it all depends on how much information you're looking to put into the photograph.
I didn't want much. If I remember correctly, maybe I was watching the screen and I always have it where I see the screen and the histogram. And I am guessing that I figured out what I wanted and what I did not want. I didn't want any more than this.
Okay. All right.
The scene was not that pretty, so I did not want much of it.
Okay. What I would do is, you know, challenge yourself for at least one exposure. See if you can get some of that ground to come through. All right. Because in a distance shot like this, instead of being random little spots of light and you actually see the landscape, it gives it more of a sense of place. So challenge yourself for at least, like I said, one exposure. Leave it open a little bit more so you can capture that ground plane and then compare.
Okay.
You know? So.
And then fix it in Photoshop if you don't like it.
Fix it in
Let's see.
You can always burn it down. Absolutely.
Here we are, 4 seconds. I don't know why I did it this way. The top part, this is cropped. The top part wasn't that good, so I was like, okay, here is hanging over that.
Okay.
And that's the last one that I have.
Okay. Nice. Yeah, so
Give Carol something to talk about for an hour.
there you go. Awesome, Carol. But
we should probably think of every time we do the Q&A, okay, what's the next holiday coming up? Right now it's July 4th.
yeah.
In September, So in October, we probably should be talking about Halloween. November, talking about the holidays.
Yeah, there you go. And you know what? It completely slipped my mind, 4th of July. So I'm glad Carol thought of it.
I can't believe the
And
year's almost half over.
oh, I know. Seems like the older we get, the faster it goes. Holy crap. Well,
You got that right.
jeez. Yeah. So,
Alan, is that Chinese New Year behind you?
That's at Beasley Zoo last winter.
Oh, okay.
nice.
That would be a good topic in November, or probably November. How do we shoot at night at either lake compounds or at the park in Meriden, Public Park? How to do how to do night Christmas lighting.
I know is it East Haven? East Haven
East
does.
Haven has it,
Yeah.
yes.
East Haven has one at Lighthouse Point. Um that's the closest one to me. That's the one I'm kind of familiar with.
Especially if you walk around as opposed to most of them my way were
You have to drive through, yeah.
Yeah, hard to
it's not worth taking the camera out.
Well, you can. I mean,
Yeah, you gotta have something, yeah.
you have to
Convince someone to drive, yeah.
yeah, you have to find a way of mounting the tripod with inside the car. You know, you just roll down the window and stick it out. But you can do it. And then you just bring the car to a halt, take the shots that you want, and you move on. I mean, yeah, I mean you're limited, but it can be done.
You also have to deal with the temperature. If it's warm in the car and cold outside for the Christmas shot.
Yeah, but you're gonna be in a warm car, so
No, but the lens might fog up, right? Or,
no, that's the lens is gonna be in the car with you.
oh,
Yeah, so it'll be nice and warm. So actually, if you have the window rolled down, the camera's going to acclimate to that in between temperature. So, yeah, it's only when you go from one extreme to the other right away that's when you get into the problems. But if it's acclimated to that temperature, that's not a big deal. So,
can I share again?
sure.
Seeing you mentioned in the car, Carol, hold on a second. It is possible. And I'll show you how I did this. And where does Zoom go? Oh boy. Where does Zoom go? There we are. Let me share screen. And let's do this one. I was in the car in the back seat in Waterbury. In a friend's car, we were going from, Doug, I may have shown you this before.
I think so. It looks familiar.
Okay, from Route 8, and then we were going to go through the intersection. So I said to him, let me go in the back seat because I want to take a picture of the clock tower. And I have a shutter speed of 1/1000.
Yep. Yep.
And yes, I did show this on here one night. So I took this, I believe I took, yeah, this part of the back of the train station. This was from the Route 8 side. These are edited. And again, a little bit further down, now you see the church,
Oh yeah.
Episcopal Church on the green. And you see the courthouse here over this light.
Oh
You
yeah.
see the courthouse. And on the first picture, you see the old telephone company building. You see the courthouse.
The courthouse,
you see the
yep.
tower. You see the courthouse, and you see the old phone company building. And over here is the church on the
church,
green.
yeah.
Do you see my arrow when I point this?
Yes.
Good. This is good to know if I'm teaching. There we are. The sky was great. Where are we? And this is when we got on 84. And I'm still in the back seat.
That's sharp. That is sharp.
But what was great about this was, I didn't have to go set up a tripod any place and take the time to figure out. Just stood in the car and and went. It's like, boy, this is fun.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But of course, the trick is definitely to have a fast enough shutter.
Yes.
And obvious the light was fantastic. I mean, the sky exposure and the ground plane exposure, dead on, dead on. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I was lucky that day. I was like, oh, let's take advantage of this. So I said, I was sitting in the back seat.
Cool, 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 cool. All right. Awesome. Any other questions?
Just for insight, next weekend, Saturday, Brantford has their first fireworks, which is spectacular. The only drawback is that you got to get there early.
Yeah, well, most locations you do, yeah.
On the point, it's a fabulous way over the water. Great shots, great shots. Just
Awesome.
an insight tip.
Cool. Yeah, actually, now's the time to start looking up schedules, especially if you want to, like I said, find something close to you to, get your feet wet, and then that way when it comes for the big show, you're good to go.
Camden is early. It's going to be June 30th on Friday night. I can't remember if they have a band. No, they don't have a band ahead of time this year, I don't think. The fireworks will start about 9:20. And there's parking. It's near the Hamden Library and it's near the Hamden Library.
Yeah.
That big park near there. And if the rain day is the following day.
Another thing that you might want to take into consideration, especially if you're interested in composing something that has any kind of foreground or background elements, is going to the location ahead of time and scouting it out and finding where a good position will be for you to set up yourself for the fireworks. I know it can be kind of a little bit of a hit and miss because you don't know exactly where the fireworks people are going to be set up, but vantage point wise, you can kind of get a sense of the environment and be a little bit prepared. It says, oh, I need to be in the south end or I need to be on the north end. That way, when you get there, when there's crowds all over the place, you at least have a direction to go to and not like, oh, I don't know where. Okay. So.
Very important. Stand by your camera at all times.
At all times.
Two kids decided to run, and of course it's half dark.
Yep.
And they almost tipped over my camera.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that I have in my bag, let me pull out my bag. This is part of my permanent kit everywhere I go, is I have a little flashlight. Okay. But here's the thing. When you are photographing outdoors at night, and it doesn't matter what you're photographing outdoors at night, your eyes get used to that low level of light. Okay. And you know what happens when you're suddenly hit with a bright light, you get that night blindness. Okay. So what I do is I carry this little miniature flashlight. It's only like 3 inches long, as you can see. Okay. But it's not a white light. I don't know if you can see it. It's a red light. Okay. It's a red light. And what this does is it saves your eyes from that night blindness. All right. It gives you enough illumination. It's not a white light. So, it's not like that hard white light hitting your eyes. It's only the red light. So it's on one end of the spectrum. All right. And the reason for this All right. Since Alan likes the technical stuff, okay, we have lights and cones, all right, or rods and cones rather. And there's three major bandwidths that our eyes are tuned to, all right. Our eyes at night are tuned into more of the blue-green side. So we don't want to ruin that. So having a red light hits the side of our light sensitivity that is usually not in play at night. So we can target that with the red light and not kill our night vision. So I suggest even if you have like a normal white light, just go to the hardware store, the automotive store, or Walmart, or whatever, and get some of that the red fix-it tape for tail lights, and put a couple of layers of that over your lens and turn it red. It does save your eyes. And this always travels with me in my bag. So that way you can adjust your settings on the camera without ruining your eyesight. If you drop something, you can search for it on the ground without ruining your eyesight. You can use it to scare off kids that are running by. All right, flash it right in their eyes. You're not going to kill their night vision, okay? But you will be seen, okay?
There are apps now on the phone. You could, it will be red, green, blue.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I forgot the name of the app, but it's I use it quite a bit.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, so it uses the screen, not the okay.
The screen
Yeah.
will turn red or green or yellow. The
Right.
primary colors, all
Yeah.
the primary colors.
Oh, good to know. Yeah, because if you have the flashlight on the back of your
Right.
that's just a white. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know how many times I'm walking around the house. I'll purposely turn this on and I'll use that to I almost stepped on that.
Yeah.
But
that's how I get upstairs in the bedroom.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'll have to look into that. Thank you. So awesome. All right, I think we're all set for fireworks. All right, after the 4th of July, we're gonna have to share firework photos here. Damn it! Now I got to go out and shoot fireworks. I wasn't planning on it, but
I wasn't planning on it either.
you know, it's funny. So my building is downtown Shelton, and we typically, in the past, we flip-flop between Shelton and Derby, who hosts the fireworks. But because Shelton is a bigger city, Derby's kind of like a small town. Shelton has the budget, Derby really doesn't. Pandemic, really killed everybody's budget. So the past couple of years, Shelton has hosted the fireworks, and they host it literally half a mile from here, right? And I have access to the roof. So I've actually gone on the roof of the building and photographed some fireworks.
That's all you need is roof access.
That's it. That's it.
Oh,
Yeah.
Doc is our new. I was on the front yard of the post office last year.
Oh, really? Okay.
I mean, it was an interesting place. I had to go out to the parking lot. But
Yeah.
boy, it would be nice to try it from the roof one time.
Well, let me
I
know.
used to go down to the shelter when they before, I don't know, a few years before the pandemic, they would dual host them, so you would have fireworks going off both sides of the freeway.
Yeah.
Yeah, dueling fireworks is a pretty good show.
Yeah. And depending on where you are, you can always look for a parking garage. Okay. One thing, since you mentioned, the parking lot in the post office, it just occurred to me, this might be a little bit further away, but here in Shelton, we have the corporate towers that has this phenomenal view of from the corporate towers down all the way to the river. Okay, but the corporate towers are maybe a mile, mile and a quarter away from where the fireworks are. So I don't know how small the fireworks would look from corporate towers. I might go plant myself at corporate towers and put a long lens and see what I get. You
It'd be
know?
nice if you knew someone who had a place on the top floor.
Do you want access to the roof? I'll have to talk to my co-conspirator, all right? Because
No, but he was talking about Marie Claire just walked in.
I saw.
You
Yeah.
have access to the roof where you are,
Yes.
not to the roof over at corporate tower.
No.
Yeah.
No. Well, from there, they do have a parking garage.
Yeah.
It's only like 2 levels, but it's on the hillside. It's behind the buildings. It's on the hillside, so you have this sweeping view of everything down to the river. So I'll have to check it out. Good.
We've
to
done
point
some
out.
of that in the past, trying to find little hot spots so we wouldn't have to go downtown. And
Yeah.
we haven't really found anything yet.
Yeah. One year there's a parking garage across the river in Derby. I shot from the roof of that, and I got some really cool shots. Fireworks, yeah.
Fireworks.
Yeah.
You gave me an idea. Waterbury has it where people are in the parking lot of the of the mall, Grand City Mall, and the fireworks are up where the cross is, Holy Land.
Oh, they shoot them from up there?
Yes.
Oh,
And so,
yeah. Yeah.
Waterbury Hospital has a parking garage. And one day, I don't know if you've seen my pictures of the Holiday Inn being torn down, but I looked at one direction and I was able to see the cross, either from there or from outside. But I think I got to take a trip to the hospital and see if I could shoot from there.
Yeah. Scope it out. You never know.
Yeah.
All right. Scope it out ahead of time, because the day of, with the crowds and the traffic and everything, that's not the time to do it.
I would scope it out at night.
Yeah.
The other thing is, Channel 8 always lists all of the fireworks on their website.
There you go. Okay. Awesome. I think we have an agenda for these coming weekends. Alrighty. Okay. I'll have to speak with my co-conspirator Brian and see what they're going to be doing, and I'll let you know. Okay. I still got your hand blown vase here. Remember the day you came down and you brought these things? All right, and that's still sitting here. Waiting for when I see you again. Wrapped up in your sock. And I checked, and I'm sorry to say the $300 is not in there. Man, that thing is heavy. That's a paperweight. So, all right. Any other questions people need answers to?
Yes, I have actually two.
Two?
Yeah, the first one. If you just want to do one, that's fine.
No, we'll do both.
And the Lightroom, you were talking, and I can't remember if it was Lightroom or it was in Photoshop. It's here, it's coming, but some AI denoising or something that we could do, just plunk it on. And because I know we were talking about Topaz and all that and tools, and I know that subject came up that it's on the horizon in Lightroom or Photoshop.
No, we have the denoise now. Let me. pull up. Do I have, I don't know if I have a noisy, is this noisy photo? I don't think this is a noisy photo. Yeah, this really isn't all that major noisy. I was at ISO 100, yeah. So, but yeah, so there is a denoise available. All right, I'm just gonna pull this one up just for an example. ISO 200. So there's really no noise, but I'll just use this as an example. Okay. If we go to our detail, all right, where we have our sharpening, all right, that's legacy right there, and then the bottom part is now renamed to manual noise reduction. Before it was just noise reduction. This is all legacy with all these sliders. That's all legacy. But if you notice in the middle, we have this new thing called noise reduction, denoise, which uses AI. So it'll reduce noise with AI. The downside to this, some may say it's a downside, some may not. If you're used to third-party denoising, it's no different from that. What it's going to do is it's going to create a new file, right? So it applies to denoise. It generates a new file for you to continue your work on. The thing is, with other denoise plugins, it'll generate a TIFF file, typically, if I remember correctly. This one will generate a DNG file, which is Adobe's open source raw format. All right, so it applies to denoise and gives you back a raw image. Okay.
I just noticed that this is not available with for JPEGs.
Correct. It is a raw only. All right. Don't fret.
Brian, you probably weren't on the call when I said that. I decided to try, I just decided to open a picture. The first picture I opened was a JPEG, and it wouldn't work.
Yeah, hold on. Don't fret. I don't let's see. Let me see if I have anything with oops, come on, metadata. Let's just look up ISO. ISO 800. Oh, these are ISO 800. All right, and let's go into the devil. Okay, so yeah, maybe I can. I know what I'll do. I will create a virtual copy. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and just, oops, not compare. I want to crop. I'm going to crop in really, really tight, just so that hopefully I can accentuate the noise. I don't know, is it coming across the noise? Let's see if I can crop in maybe a little bit more. I want to really, really just accentuate fit. All right, everybody see that noise?
Yes.
Maybe.
I see it.
All right. Oh, there we go. Hopefully now you can see some of it. Oh, you know what? I let me share my screen. Let's do that. Share. There we go. All right. Hopefully now you can see it. Okay. And if I zoom in, you can definitely see that noise there, right? Okay. All right. All right. We have access to the regular denoise. okay? But if you notice that it really kind of softens up some of the detail, so we have to kind of balance that out with other tools, right? And one of my other favorite tools for adding a little bit of texture is to come in to the texture tab and just kind of boost it up. But you know, you're playing the balance game, all right? Okay. With the, let me see, go back to the detail. Let's reset that. And let's reset our sharpening. Okay. With the denoise tool, you have to be in a raw format image. If you are in JPEG, that button becomes mute. It grays out. Okay. If you have JPEGs that you need to denoise and you're finding that the legacy denoise is not doing it, here is another trick that you can do, okay? What you're going to do is you're going to go to your local adjustments. You're going to create a mask, okay? And you're going to select the linear gradient, okay? And you know that if you press and hold the shift key, it's going to lock it to that horizontal or vertical mode, right? So we're going to hold it to that horizontal mode, all right? I usually do it like this, okay? And I usually make this very, very tight, okay? But what we're going to do is we're going to take this and we're going to move it off, just slightly off of the image, okay? So what's happening here is with this particular mask, we are applying 100% of an effect on the entire image, okay? So this is probably the easiest way to do it. All right, let me zoom back in to fit. All right, and because we're using a local adjustment, we are only limited to a very few select tools, okay? We have the detail, all right? But if you notice, in the detail, we do not have anything that says reduce noise. We have effects. If I go to my effects, you're going to notice that there's nothing there that says reduce noise, okay? Well, let's see, texture kind of cleans things up a little bit. Well, we can do that, but if you notice, we still have a little bit of softness, all right? So that doesn't quite work, all right? Clarity, all right? If we add clarity, oof, all right, that goes the other way. And if we bring it down, it's not doing anything. So these tools are not very effective. So how do we do it? Well, there's a bizarre little effect that happens with the noise slider. If we take the noise slider right here, okay, and we add noise, all right, you'll notice that it actually denoises the image, all right? And of course, if you go too far, it's going to give you that kind of plasticky, everything kind of running together look. So you have to, you have to find the balance where you're reducing the noise down enough that it's a usable image. And then from there, you can now increase your sharpness. All right. We can go to our effects and increase our texture. All right. And bring back any sharpness that we may have lost. Okay. This will work on JPEGs. This will work on RAW files without having to generate a new file. So if you don't want to generate a new file, here's an option for you to explore. Okay? Because in all fairness, not every file that we work on is worthy of generating, all this extra work, all this extra, files, right? Because it's just more space that's taking up on our system. And if the image isn't one that you're going to develop to the point where, it's this attention grabbing image, all right, do you really want to put that extra effort of generating new files? All right. And then it becomes it's like, okay, when do I do it? Do I do it before I start any creative edits? All right. Or do I want to take care of all my creative edits and then do my denoise? Okay. Or do I take it to a certain point where, I need to add the denoise and then continue from there? It becomes a lot of juggling. So if you're not up to all that juggling, give this a try. All right. Again, linear mask. You're going to move the mask. Let me go 100%. You're going to move the mask completely off. All right. Oh, actually, here you can see. Here, let me make it fit. You can see the difference. Look at that difference. Okay. So you're gonna take it just off the image. All right. Apply your settings. And then from here, if you need to apply any other masks, you can just keep going, keep working. No need to, go to a secondary file, or if you're using a third-party app, you don't need to go to a third-party app, but for those of you who do use third-party apps, you'll have to do a side-by-side comparison, and you have to weigh for yourself, does this compare to what I can get with maybe something like Topaz? All right. And then at that point, this just becomes another tool in your tool belt. You say, okay, well, it has a lot of noise. I'm just going to share this on Facebook. I really, I'm not too crazy about this image. I don't want to generate a new file. I'm going to do what Duck showed me, and that's going to be good enough for this one. All right. But this other one here, this one I want to enter into a competition, so I'm going to put a little bit more effort. That one's going to go to Topaz, it's going to go to Silver Effects, it's going to go to this, it's going to go to that. And that one, you're going to walk through a much higher workflow. All right. So again, it's what the end use is going to be. All right. So hopefully this gives you something to work with. Okay. All right. Any other questions? That was good. Oh, you said you have 2 questions, Bri.
Yes. I guess this launches off the thing we were working, well, maybe it has to do with Topaz. We were working with that photo from a couple weeks ago, the old one. But, so, when I work with this Topaz, I know, well, you're over here. When I work with Topaz, let me change my screen. When I work with Topaz, when I, hold on, let me just, I don't want to say this. I just lost my train of thought when I moved the screen.
Yeah, no.
Anyway, so anyway, there's this thing in Topaz that says, excuse me, I went through all these things where one of the things you can do with Topaz, you can enlarge your picture. So it used to be 2,000 by 4,000. Now it's 3,000 by 6,000 or something like that. Pixels, let's say. And another thing you can do is called enhance the resolution.
Mm-hmm.
So I was playing around with that, and when I got done, I noticed, that it made the picture bigger and all that. But when I brought it into Photoshop, and I look in Photoshop and I look at the image information, it still says 72 pixels per inch.
Yeah.
And so my question is directed towards, like, these images, I ultimately want to send them to the printer. They're part of the book project. And so is that something you do in Photoshop? Do you go there and change that to 300? And what does that do if you do that kind of thing? Because I guess I haven't tried it yet, but I'm concerned that, you know, if you send a picture that's too low a resolution, they'll tell you about it and say, hey, you got to fix this.
Right.
So is
Okay.
that the way to fix it? And what's going on there?
All right. So this is one of those topics that can be very confusing to some people because when you start thinking on it at first, there seems to be no correlation between the two. Okay. So what's the best way to describe it? All right, so if we were to compare pixel for pixel, okay, you have a sensor. All right, you have a sensor that's APS-C sensor. Okay. No, let's make it even more. You have a sensor that's micro four thirds. All right, and you have a sensor that is full frame. All right, and each sensor has 3,000 pixels across. Okay, the full frame sensor is about 2.5 inches wide. The 4/3 is maybe 3/4 of an inch wide. Correct? You get that, right? But they both have 3,000 pixels across, even though they're two different sizes. So the pixels in the full frame is going to look like this. Oops, let me take my little notes off. You don't need the notes. All right, this is 1 pixel on a full frame. This is 1 pixel on a 4/3. Correct? All right. Now, if we take 72 of these, all right, 72 of these across on the full frame, and we print it out at 72 dpi, we will get a line of pixels that's 1 inch long. 1 inch long. Okay. We can do the same thing. 72 of these pixels all the way across. Okay. If we were to compare the line of pixels 72 across and the line of pixels 72 across with these two different, they're going to be two different sizes, right? The larger sensor size is going to be longer. The smaller size is going to be shorter, physically wise, right? But because they're both at 72 dpi, they will both print an inch long line. All right, that's at 72 dpi. All right, so now if we have a page that's 8 by 10, all right, and if we do the math, 72 times 8, because it's 72 pixels per inch, times 8, all right, I don't have my calculator, and I am terrible at math, so 72 times 8, we need a pixel depth of 576 pixels wide in order to fit on that 8 by 10 sheet, correct? But the problem is, if we get close to it, we're going to see the pixels, all right? Because 72 little dots across on an inch is kind of rough, all right? Those are going to be very large pixels. We're going to be able to see them. So what happens is we're going to get that stair-stepping effect on any of our edges. So we don't want to print at 72 dpi, all right? We want to print at a much higher resolution, all right? And typically, like home printers, roughly, well, they used to be standard about a 150. They've now gone up to, a little bit higher, all right? But if we use the old standard home printers are usually at 150 dots per inch. Commercial printers will print at 300 DPI. It's usually more around 270, 274, 276, whatever the math works out to. All right, not quite 300, but close enough. All right, so that in order to fill up this 1 little inch, we need 300 pixels. Okay, so using the math, 300 pixels times 8, we need 2,400 pixels minimum of an image in order to print nice and crisp on an 8x10. Right? Make sense? Okay, so here is where it gets confusing. I have an image that's 5,000 pixels. And it says it's at 72 DPI. All right. If I were to send that to a printer at 150 DPI with no interpolation, with no math, with no conversion, with just straight into it, what would happen is I would get a portion of my image printed on that 8x10. All right, so 2,400 and, 560 pixels of that 3,000, what did I say, 3,000, 5,000? All right, that 5,000 image wide photo will be printed on my 8x10, okay? That doesn't make any sense, all right, because we want the entirety of the picture squeezed in, okay? So if we were to squeeze it in, right, 5,000 pixels wide, and we to cram it into 8 inches across at 72 dots per inch, what would end up happening is we squeeze it down and we lose a lot of data. Because what it's going to do is it's going to say, okay, we've compressed, what is it, 5,000 divided by, what is it, would be 72? We lose more than half, almost 2/3 of our image is lost. All right, because what we're taking is we're taking 300 pixels and we're reducing it down to 72 in order to fit on there. All right, which obviously is going to look like crap. All right. So if we instead say, okay, you know what? I want to embed into this file that in order to print commercially, it needs to print at 300 DPI. So what happens is when they take that 5,000 pixel wide image and then they compress it into that 2,400 pixels wide, it's not going to compress it down to 72 dots per inch. It's going to compress it down to 300 dots per inch. So we'll get finer detail on all our edges. The compression's not going to be as great. All right. Now, most printers are aware, and most printer software will convert. All right. But things happen. Okay. You don't want to take that chance of it accidentally printing at 72 dots per inch, because then you're just going to get mud back. All right. So this is why I said, typically in most people's brain, there's no correlation between the size of your image and the DPI. The DPI has nothing to do with what you see on the screen. All right. As a matter of fact, there's a good example. You have a photograph that's 5,000 pixels wide. Your screen is 1,920 pixels wide. So it's taking that 5,000 pixel wide image and compressing it down to 1920 by 1080. Okay. And your screens are typically 72 DPI or 96 DPI, right? Unless you have a, super high definition monitor, then it's going to be a little better. Okay. But even the HD screens, a lot of the HD screens, like these screens, these are typically about 150 DPI right here. Okay. So the resolution of the output in most people's mind doesn't make sense with the input, because there's a little bit of arbitrariness going on, right? Because it's whatever you send them, it's got to be compressed down anyway, right? The 72 or the 150 or the 300 just basically says how much compression. 72 dots per inch, we're really going to compress that file down to just nothing. At 300, not so much. All right. Here's a perfect example. When you look at something on a billboard, all right, you're looking at something that's maybe 50 feet wide, 20 feet tall, 10 feet tall, whatever it is, the ratio, right? 50 feet by 10 feet. Do you know what the DPI for those are? Wild guess? What do you think? All right.
I'd say 50.
50?
Not
Okay.
per foot.
Yeah.
I am going to say 6,000.
6,000? 6,000 DPI? Would it surprise you if it was if I told you it's more like 23 to 25 DPI?
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So now that introduces the other factor that comes into play with printing. All right. When we're talking about DPI, it's dots per inch. It's the size of the dot that gets put down on the paper, all right, in order to get an image that's an inch wide. Okay. So if I were to print at 72 DPI, I'm putting down 72 dots of ink across to get an inch. Okay. So here's where you can actually start seeing the grain of the image, or the stair stepping on the edges. Okay. When we start going up to 150, it smooths out because that stair stepping is a lot finer. And then when we get into 300 DPI, we barely notice any stair stepping because the dots are so small that we really can't see it with the naked eye. All right. But if we think about how we view images, if we have a 4x6, we're usually looking at it like this. Okay. And so, nice. Very nice. Okay. But that's not being printed at 72 DPI. That's being printed at, anywhere between 150 to 300. Okay. So we can get away with a file size of 1,000 pixels. All right. A 1 megapixel image will print very nicely on a 4x6. All right. And this is why megapixels really don't matter. Okay. I can take that 1 megapixel image and blow it up to billboard size at 25 DPI, and it's still going to look great. Because why? I'm looking at that billboard from a half a mile away. If I were to walk up to the billboard, I will see these huge blots of ink. All right. I can take my finger and count all the blots of ink that create the image. Okay. but it's because we're looking at it from a distance that we don't notice. All right. It's the resolution of our eyes at this point. So at that distance, all those blots of ink kind of mush together and becomes the image. All right. If I were to take that one megapixel image that makes my 4x6 and now scale it up to an 8x10, at the 8x10, we're literally doubling, or no, well, we're doubling length and we're doubling the width. So we're literally quadrupling the size because it's the square of, right? We take that 1 megapixel and we blow it up to an 8x10 at 300 dpi, because our 4x6 was printed at 300 dpi. All right, we take that 1 megapixel at 300 dpi, we're going to see pixels. All right, because the original 1000 pixels is smaller than the required 2400 that the size of the paper demands. Follow? So what we're doing is we're actually enlarging the size of the dots that are required to fill that space. All right. And we're making the dots bigger. So now we actually see the pixels when we print. Okay. So in order to print an 8x10, we may need a 4 megapixel image, or better yet, a 6 megapixel image. All right, a 6 megapixel image will print an 8x10, all right, or an 8.5 by 11, even 11 by 14, really, really nicely. All right, but you take that 4 megapixel image, or the 6 megapixel image, and create a poster. Now we're back to our original problem, where we start seeing the pixels if we're up close. But most of the time, we're looking at posters from a little bit more than a arm's length away. So it may be a low quality poster, but it's still a good poster, right? Because we can look at it and we can appreciate it. I won't charge high value price for a poster of that quality, all right? Because if you get up close to it, then you're going to start seeing the pixelation. But you can very easily print a poster as long as you're viewing it from a little bit of a distance. But most of the time, that's what we're doing, all right? So hopefully that gives you a little bit of understanding of DPI in relation to pixels. All right.
So let me ask another way, because I was talking Photoshop and changing those images. I'm working on this book, and I've got this image I'm working on in Lightroom. Because I haven't used that book tool yet, or even if I was using another one. How do I know when I say, okay, I want to export this image? Because that's what you do, right? You have to export an image of some sort for this thing to work with, right?
Correct.
I mean, like the book thing, you have to be exported. So
right.
Do you just export it for?
Okay,
so be having a 3:4 aspect ratio. You make it that size and then export it to the best way you can, or let Lightroom figure that out.
All right. Well, so if you're doing the page layout through Lightroom, don't worry about any of that.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Not at all. Not at all. Let me walk that back, actually. Let me walk that back. For the most part, you don't have to worry about it. Okay. Unless you're doing some heavy cropping. If you're doing some heavy cropping on an image, then you have to be careful. All right. So let's take your example of working in Photoshop. Okay. I'm going to keep the numbers simple. All right. you have a pixel width of 5,000 pixels. All right. While you're in Photoshop, go ahead and do all your editing. You're actually editing at 72 dots per inch because that's what you're seeing on the screen. Okay. And most of the time, you don't have to worry about it. All right. Because if you export a 5,000 wide image, 5,000 pixel wide image at 72 dpi, and you export that same 5,000 pixel wide image at 300 dpi, and you look at both of them on the screen, you're not going to see a difference because technically there is no difference. And they're still both 5,000 pixels wide. All right. The only time you'll see a difference is when you print it. One will print out at, 24 inches, and the other one will print out at 10 inches. All right. I'm just pulling numbers out of my head. All right. The 300 dpi image will print out at 10 inches. The 72 dpi will print out at 24 inches. Okay, because what you're telling the system to do is print this 5,000 pixel wide image at 72 dots per inch. So actually, let's do some simple math. 5,000 divided by 72 equals times 12 equals 83 foot image. Okay, at 72 dots per inch. I think I did the math right. 5,000 divided by 300 times, yeah, all right, so 83 feet or 83 inches rather. Yeah, that's where I went wrong. At 72 dpi, it'll print at 83 inches. At 300 dpi, it'll print at 20 inches. Okay, so it's only when you output it, when you actually do the physical printing, that it makes a difference. All right, so why bother in software? Okay, well, when you're doing page layout, that becomes a different matter. A page layout, you're working digitally, and actually, you're a graphic artist, all right? You'll be able to understand this. I need to lay out this page, all right? This page is 8 by 10, all right? Actually, it's a little bigger, but 8 by 10, all right? And I want an image here that's 7 inches wide, okay? So I have to make sure that the image that I'm editing will fit that space. So I'm going to be working in Photoshop. I'm going to set my settings to, instead of working in pixels, I'm going to be working in inches. All right. So because the software is doing the conversion, it needs to know what to convert by. Because like I said, at 72, 5,000 pixels is 83 inches. 300 pixels is 20 inches. Two totally different sizes. Okay. So if I'm going to be working on a 5,000 pixel wide image, and at 300 it fits into a 20-inch space, I know it's going to be scaled down. All right. So if I want to make sure that I get the best quality, all right, I'm going to reduce my image down by inches. I'm going to say, okay, scale this down to 7 inches at 300 dpi. All right. And then it's going to kick out whatever, let's see. So let's do the math. 300 times 7 equals 2,100 pixels. So it's going to reduce the size down to 2,100 pixels. So now you have a perfect image that's going to fit into a 7-inch space, print at 300 DPIs, and you've saved file size. Okay? Does that make sense? All right? Because we're working in a space that correlates to a physical. All right? So pixels don't mean squat on a piece of paper. All right? Pixels don't mean squat. Why do pixels don't mean squat? Because which pixel are we working from? Are we working from this pixel or are we working from this pixel? All right? Or maybe we're working from this pixel because it came from a cell phone. Right? So we can't use pixels. All right? But we can use inches because inches make sense. All right? Inches make sense. A 7-inch image will fit from here to here on my page.
So are you saying that, let's say I have a photo that's, I'm sorry, let's say I have a photo that's 5,000 pixels wide, and I'm editing in Photoshop, and I want it to be, ratio 5:4. So should I resize by saying, by going to image size and making that 8:10?
Okay, well,
It's instead of
no, ratios is a totally different animal now. Ratio is the difference between the height and the width, the relationship between the height and the width. All right. So for example, my computer screen is 16 by 9. All right. So if we were to convert that to inches, if I had a screen that was 16 inches wide, because the aspect ratio is 16 by 9, I would know automatically the height of that screen would be 9 inches. All right. So if I have an image ratio of 16 by 9, I know that it's going to fit perfectly into my screen. And as a matter of fact, that's the default ratio for most digital cameras. All right. Because it's the default for, computer screens. And I think somebody got smart along the way and did that purposely. So when I export an image from Lightroom that I want to use as, like, for example, a wallpaper on my desktop, I am doing two things. I am downscaling it from 5,000 pixels to 1920 across. All right. That's the only number I need to worry about. Okay. That's the only number I need to remember is 1920 across. Okay. So that means pixel in the image to pixel on the screen is going to be a 1-to-1 replacement. I can literally pull a pixel off my file and put it onto the screen in that same designation, the XY designation, and that's where it fits. Okay. The aspect ratio, 16 by 9. So if my aspect ratio on my image is 16 by 9, I know that it's going to be a 1-to-1 fit on my screen. Okay. But we also have different aspect ratios. We have aspect ratio for an 8:10. Okay. An 8:10.
Which is 5:4.
Which is 5:4. Okay. Which if you take a 16 by 9, we're now losing. Actually, you know what? Why am I? Let me go here. Okay. I'm still sharing. Okay. So if we go to our crop tool in Lightroom, okay. Let me reset that as shot. There we go. And if I hit the letter O, it toggles through different overlays. Okay, and one of the overlays that you're going to see pop up is an aspect ratio overlay. Where is it? Here it is. Okay, so I don't know if you guys can see it. Let me see if
I can see it.
All right, here we go. All right, 5x7. Why is it? Oh, there we go. 5x7 and 4x5. Okay, so the outside is 16x9. Okay, 5x7 and 4x5. All right, so 5x7 is like 8.5 by 11, and the 4x5 would be your 8x10. All right, so if I want to print this image at 8x10, all right, and most printers will take that 8x10 from the center and you'll lose the two pieces on the side. I know exactly what I'm going to be losing, all right, because I can see it here. All right, so this is my 5x7 and this is my 4x5. Right, so all this space here and all that space down there gets lost. All right. So so now what I can do is I can go here and I can say, okay, I want that 4x5, which is, you know, our 8x10. Okay, and you can see once I change it here. Here is that space that we lose, and here's that space that we lose. All right, that we caught on our overlay. Okay. Oh. All right, so now I can just switch back to my normal. And because I know I'm going to be losing that, I can say, okay, well, I want to lose it on the left, or I want to lose it on the right, or, you know, shift it, whatever. We can adjust it here in our software. So I can say, okay, now I have that 4x5 aspect ratio. But if we look at our image size, it's 4,471 pixels wide.
How'd you get that? How are you going to be able to see that?
Oh, the letter I on the keyboard
Okay.
toggles between, it's I for information. So I, and you can tell Lightroom what to put up there. So I usually have the date and the my cropped. This is my cropped size. All right, and I've pressed it again. It gives me my settings and what lens I used. Okay, and
it's under view loop.
yeah, so view. Oh no, what is it? View.
Loop info, loop overlay.
Oh, loop info. Yeah, there you go. Okay. Cycle. Shoot. Info 1, info 2. Loop overlay. All right. You can tell what to show, and then the view options. This is where you would tell it, you know, what kind of information you want to display, and you have the full range. Okay. All right. So, so aspect ratio has nothing to do with pixel depth, all right, or pixel width. All right. Now at, what did I say? 4,471 pixels. All right. That is huge. All right. If I know that in order to get a 7 inches across here, I only need 2,100 pixels. Okay. This is, twice that size. So what's going to happen if I export this at 4,471 pixels, all right, when I send it to the printer at 300 DPI, it only needs 2,100. It's going to shrink it down in order to fit. Okay, but I'm going to be sending a file size that relates to the number of pixels. So if I want to save a little bit of file space, I'll go ahead and export this at 2100. All right. Actually, let's see if we can actually see export. Will it show me image sizing? Does it show me? No, it's not going to show me. Photoshop will show you. This Lightroom doesn't. All right. So what I'll do is I'll say, okay, don't export at 4471, export at 2100. Okay. So I'm sizing it specifically to my needs to be able to print 7 inches across on my page.
Oh, 7 inches, okay.
All right.
So 300 times 7, right? Okay.
Right. Okay.
I was using the wrong numbers.
Yeah. Most of the time, you don't have to worry about this because most digital cameras, if you're not doing heavy cropping, all right, you can do it. All right. So let's take this example, what we did earlier. All right. So what did we do? We did a ridiculously heavy crop. So let's go back to my original, and we said, we cropped down to just where the bird was, right? Because I was showing you the noise. But let's say that's what I wanted to print. I go ahead and say enter. There's my new resolution, all right? Let's see if you can see it. 1868 by 1245. That will never, ever print on a 7-inch image at 300 DPI. Okay. It'll print a 4x5. All right. It might be pushing it a little bit, but it'll print a 4x5. Okay. It won't print an 8x10 at all. All right. So there's where, understanding DPI in relation to your resolution comes into play, because you can say, okay, I want to pull the best part of this image. I wasn't able to physically get close to my subject. I was maxed out on my lens. All right. But look how clean and crisp and clear and beautiful this crop is. All right. All I got to do is look at that number, and right off the bat, I know, with doing a little bit of simple math, what I can get away with. All right. Now, 1868 isn't even the size of my screen. Okay. It's going to be smaller than my screen. So, unfortunately, cropping it that heavy isn't even going to be enough to fill a HD screen. HD screen, 1920 by 1080. Okay.
Do you remember last summer, and maybe I'm getting too far into this at this late hour. Do you remember last summer I asked you about printing, and I was using my camera that had maybe like 5,000 pixels wide, and I wanted 4x6.
Yep.
And the 96 DPI stuff came out better than the 300 DPI stuff. And this was with going to Walgreens.
Yeah.
Could it be because for 300 DPI I didn't size, maybe I should have sized it as a smaller size instead of 5,000 pixels wide?
It's hard to answer that question because I'm honestly not familiar with how those particular printers work. And
I have a funny feeling those printers, like those and the Walmarts and the Walgreens and those, they are optimized for the person who walks in with a point and shoot or a cell phone camera at this point
Yes.
in time. At this
Yeah.
point in time, when when I had this issue last summer, I went to Milford Photo, and they told me in the back room, the person who was helping people do edit their photos on the screen. She said, "Oh, for 4x6, you can get away with 96 DPI."
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, you can. All right. But you, again, you got to realize that it's still being downsampled, downsized,
Okay.
you
All
know.
right.
So, and yeah, the viewing distance, yeah.
Mhm.
But ultimately, it's what is the printer's native DPI. The native DPI is typically going to be the best resolution. Okay. So often we say 300 as a catch-all, but that printer may not necessarily be printing at 300. The native DPI may be 246. Okay. So what it's going to do is it's going to resample your image. It understands it has a designation saying 300 DPI. All right. It's going to ignore that and say, okay, well, I'm not going to print it at 300 DPI. I'm actually going to downsample it to 246 because that's my native DPI. So it downsamples it. All right. And when it downsamples it, then we get a true 1-to-1 representation of 1 pixel on the downsampled image represents 1 blot of ink from the inkjet at 246 little ink bursts per inch. All right. And you got to realize that inkjet printers, they're using, 4 colors, C, M, Y, and K. All right. Cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. So it's when we get into the topic of printing, there's just so many moving parts that I usually just say, here, you're the expert, you figure it out. All right. So if I send something that I know is larger than what's needed, then, they're going to do the rest for me. If you do your own printing, then you got to start getting into the weeds. All right. And this is where understanding your personal printer's profile comes into play. So you would download the profile onto your computer and you will export to that profile so that when you're printing, you're getting a truer representation of, from the screen to the paper. So, okay. All right. So, getting back to my little bird here, I recropped it to a 16:9 aspect ratio. All right. 16:9. Okay. And here you can see that it's giving me that 2,171 pixels. So I'm well above, that 1920 for my screen. So I can actually crop in a little bit tighter. Oop, that's too much. Okay. So 18, 1901. All right, 1935. That's close enough. That's close enough to 1920. All right. So I can export this at 1920 and that's going to give me my screen resolution. All right. And you can see it fills up the space. Looks beautiful. When we step out, you can see how heavily I cropped that particular image. Okay. This works for the screen. If I were to print that on paper, that would look like crap. all right, because it's only 1935. Okay, so all right, hopefully it gives you a little understanding now about DPI, PPI, and pixels.
Could you have exported it to 1920 by
Yes,
1080?
I would.
Okay.
Without what?
Without doing that extra step of bringing it down to.
Oh, yeah. No, I was just showing how you can push the limits of a crop. Okay.
Okay.
Now, I could technically, all right, I can crop even tighter. All right. There's image size 1160 by 653. If I wanted to fill my screen, it's going to upscale it. All right. So here, in order to fit my 1920 screen here, it upscaled it. So it artificially enlarged it. Okay. So now what happens is we can see the softness around the eye. Oops. Oh, and here it is at true scale. All right. So here it looks okay, right? Where are we? But here it looks a little soft, all right, because we're upscaling it. Okay. So the actual physical size is this. You can see how much is actually lost from just an HD screen. So imagine printing this out at 300 DPI on a piece of, on a 4x5. It's gonna, your 4x5 is gonna look like this. There's my picture, 4x5. There's my picture on a 4x5. It's gonna be a postage stamp, so. Okay. All right, I got a feeling I fried some brains on that last question. I know it took me a long time to kind of figure out that whole printing aspect and DPI and PPI and, you know, doing the math because I hate math. So, but
Excuse me, I think the thing you said last, let the professionals handle it. So
yeah,
if
that's
excuse me, if it fits in the blur, then and they're happy, I'll just run with that.
yeah. So what happens when you you work on these in these templates, whether it's through Lightroom or whether you go to the Blurb site or you use any of those self-publishing places, or like for myself, I have my own software that I use for page layout. When I do an export, I export the entire document as a PDF. And then within the PDF parameters, you have all these settings that you can format for print. All right. And one of the things that gets formatted is the color space. So it converts from RGB to CMYK. And I make sure that when it downscales the images, it downscales it to 300 DPI. The actual physical size is determined by how it's laid out on the page. All right. So if I have a block, if my page is 8x10, and I have an image block that says that this image block is 5 inches, when I export through PDF, it's going to downscale that image to fit that 5 inches at the 300 DPI specification that I specify in the export information for the PDF. Okay. And you can also, well, you're a designer, graphic designer, so you can also specify overprints and all that good stuff and bleeds and margins and all that crap. So, but yeah, you don't have to, in Lightroom, you don't have to worry about it. it'll get it to blurb in the format they require, and I think it's PDF that it kicks out. So, as a matter of fact, you can do the page layout, and let's say you don't want to print it through blurb, you can print it out as a PDF, save it as a PDF. No fun, but you know, it's nice to be able to do this. Oh, look at my work. Smell the ink on the paper. Oh, look. I can take it, I can share it, I can give it to people. Look, this is my work. There's nothing quite like that physical handling of a book. So print it out. Don't just, but you can also, you know, share it as a PDF. All right. All right. We're well over time. Not a big deal. It was a good session. We had some awesome questions.
Thank you, Doug.
So, hopefully,
Next month, I will have, I'm going to play around with some printing stuff, and I'm going to write some notes for questions that I have, and I'll bring them up next week, next month, and if I could share the screen to imitate what I had done and where I have the question.
yeah, no problem. Absolutely. Okay. Awesome, guys. As always, I really do appreciate you hanging out with me on a Monday evening. All right.
Happy 4th.
I'm sorry, what?
Happy 4th.
Oh, happy 4th. Yeah. Oh, a little belated, but happy Father's Day to all of you who are fathers.
Thank you.
Okay. And yeah, so we got the 4th of July. Let's see. Let me pull up my schedule. I don't even know what I got coming up. Next week. So next week it's the 26th. We're not doing anything. Next month we have an extra Monday. So July, if you guys want to do a Patreon only, let me know what you want to get into the weeds with, and we'll put together a session for you guys. Okay, so think on that for next month. Okay, the 17th, which is typically a Q&A, it's going to be dedicated to doing the compositing in Photoshop of the multiplicity photos. So if you do not attend the multiplicity photo event, but you still want to sit in on that session, you're more than welcome to. Or if not, you can skip it and, come back to the following Mondays. Okay. So anyway, that's it for today. Thank you once again. Don't forget, share this with your friends. Let them know that we do this on a Monday evening. Let's see if we can get some of our numbers up. That'd be awesome. All right.
Thank you, Doug.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks, Chuck. Good night.
Thank you for watching Learning Photography with Duck. Brought to you in association with Milford Photo, your local full-service camera store. Located in downtown Milford, Connecticut, Milford Photo offers you a personalized shopping experience. From the latest camera gear to printing and framing services. And, of course, educational workshops to teach you the finer aspects of photography. Don't forget to tell them Duck sent you.